Hello and welcome to the Happy Families podcast. My name's Dr. Justin Coulson and I have a confession to make. I don't drink alcohol. Full stop. Don't touch it. Not as Kylie, my wife, Mrs. Happy Families. But over the last several months, in fact, over the last several years, I've had several people ask me to do a podcast about parents and alcohol, specifically mummy wine time. I just haven't felt like I can do it without sounding snobby and self-righteous and a bit of a know-it-all because I don't drink. So today on the Happy Families podcast, a conversation about mummy wine time with someone who can speak about it with more insight than anyone that I know. Earlier this year, I spoke with Victoria Vanstone. Victoria is the podcast host of Sober Awkward and the author of a parenting memoir that I didn't want to read but ended up loving called Mumming. It was just delightful. Now, after that podcast episode, Victoria and I kept on chatting. She told me about her podcast, Sober Awkward. She has won awards for that pod. And she insisted on handing me a personally signed copy of her book, 1,000 Wasted Sundays. I didn't think that it was going to be my kind of thing because I don't drink and it's not my kind of thing, like in a lot of ways. But I read it in 2 sittings. I would have read it in 1 sitting, but my flight to Perth wasn't quite long enough to finish it. So that is a long introduction, but I think it's worth it. Victoria Vanstone is my guest on the podcast today, and we're going to talk about alcohol and parenting. Stay with us. Hello, welcome to the Happy Families podcast. I'm Dr. Justin Coulson. Victoria Vanstone, welcome back to the Happy Families pod.
Hi, thanks so much for having me again. I feel sort of privileged to come on twice in such a short period of time, Justin.
Doesn't happen very often. I'm pretty selective about things, but I think the ultimate compliment you can hear from somebody about a book that you've written is wasn't interested, didn't want to read it, couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
and that's how I kind of was with both of your books. I don't read very many parenting books because I've kind of got the PhD in parenting. I don't need to. And I loved Mumming, which was what led to you handing me 1,000 Wasted Sundays and saying, I think you'll really like it. And oh my goodness, I mean, as a non-drinker who doesn't do the stuff that you describe in the book, I was completely captivated. But even as a drinker, I think that I would have been had I been one, if you know what I mean. Anyway, let's just start at the start. 1,000 Wasted Sundays tells the story of the role that alcohol played in your life. I thought that it was a really enlarging and remarkably redemptive read. I loved it. I literally, like I said, couldn't put it down except that the flight ended and I had to get off the airplane. Describe a bit more about the role of alcohol in your life.
I feel like alcohol was always coming for me from the moment I was born, whether that was environmentally, culturally, generationally. It felt like it was an arrow coming straight for me and that I couldn't avoid it. So I don't have a lot of shame about my drinking because I was just copying what the people around me were doing as I grew up. My parents were sort of entertainers. In the book, I describe if in a street full of darkness, our house was like the shining disco ball. There was always something going on, always a party. And it was never any sad drinking or alone drinking. It was always what I would call a sort of cheerful pandemonium, a sort of celebratory style of drinking. So from a very young age, all I thought was, well, I want a piece of that. Doesn't that look like fun? This is how everybody lets their hair down and has fun, and I'm going to join in. So that's what I did. From a very young age, I started stealing alcohol from the garage. As a teenager, I started using it to help with my confidence. And it's a shame that alcohol comes along at a very vulnerable age for most kids. That's sort of 12, 13, 14, where we feel like we really don't fit in. I certainly felt like that. And suddenly I had this tool to make me the funnest person in the room. And that continued through my teens. And alcohol gave me something. It gave me a personality almost. And I never looked outside that personality until I was in my 40s. I became the ultimate party animal. I was a reliable drinking buddy, and you would have wanted me around. I was a good laugh. There were lots of red flags whipping me across the face all of those years, Justin, which I chose to ignore. You know, I had promiscuous relationships. I was a recreational drug user because as soon as my inhibitions were out of the window, anyone was passing me anything, I was shoving it down my throat, like ecstasy and all sorts of things. I was just a crazy party girl. And I blew my finger off with a firework on the Millennium Night. There was a cult involved. I mean, you'll have to read the book to find out about all of that stuff. Yes. But alcohol was a huge part of my identity. And it wasn't until I had my first child that I was forced into questioning my intake.
I want to talk more about the parenting aspect shortly. Victoria, I've read a lot of memoirs. They're some of my favourite books to read. I would say that this book, A Thousand Wasted Sundays, is potentially the most revealing memoir that I've ever read. You don't really know me at all. We've had a couple of conversations, but I feel like I know you as a person. I feel like I could sit down and just start chatting away with you, as I'm sure many people have told you when they've read your book, because it makes you feel like we've known you your whole life. Anyone who's listened to this conversation, our family's home was the shining disco ball in a dark street, a cheerful panda. I mean, I just love the way that you speak and write. Revealing memoir. In spite of the very, very, very challenging things that you share, I've already highlighted, hopeful and redemptive is how I would describe the book. I got weepy. I laughed out loud on the airplane a couple of times. But but the thing for me was your personal insight into the impact that alcohol was having. Can you step us through that transition time as you went from being a single to a married to now I've got a baby and this, oh my goodness, alcohol is not doing for me what I always thought it did for me?
Well, when I got pregnant, actually, my first ever sober social event was actually my wedding day. I was about 3 months pregnant and I went to my own wedding and experienced, I was able to soak up all the love in the room. And I thought, oh, isn't this strange? What a strange world I've stepped into.
Yeah, sorry, can I just, I know that you've said that so easily, but I want to emphasize this. The first time that you've been to a social event and been sober is your wedding day. Yeah.
Yes.
And the only reason that you're sober on your wedding day is because you've got a little embryo growing away there, becoming a fetus. Yeah. So even that, for me, I think that's mind-blowing and worth just pausing on.
Yes.
Never had a social event sober. That's just astonishing.
No.
Yeah.
Well, why would I? Why would I? Somebody like me, why would I have ever gone to a party and not had a drink? It just wasn't on my radar. I equated drinking with fun. So I was always going to be there. Whether it was a house party, a birthday or a wake, I would have been bringing the fun. That was my responsibility as a human being, was to show everybody a good time, and actually to my own detriment, because it meant I gave myself away for the entertainment of others, and that led to me having to question my alcohol intake actually. But at my wedding, it was my first real insight into what sobriety might be like, and I thought, well, isn't this lovely? But then of course, as soon as that baby was born, I was actually in the hospital having a glass of champagne. Still in the bed after a C-section. So it was clear that I wasn't going to stop and something had to happen. And what happened was that I tried to combine these two lives. There's a point in the book where the mum and the party girl collide. And that is really where my life began to change. It was when I decided that I wanted to carry on my very frivolous drinking habit. And when I talk about a frivolous drinking habit, I mean, I wasn't drinking every day. I didn't have a bottle of Jack Daniels clutched to my chest and on a park bench. I wasn't losing everything. I'm talking about a very normalized social binge drinking habit, which a lot of people will resonate with. I wasn't anyone that you'd pick out of the crowd and say, she's got a problem. They'd probably say, well, Vic likes a drink. Isn't she fun? And because I grew up with that mentality, I never stopped and questioned it. So when I had a baby, suddenly I wanted to carry on my normal life and go out at the weekends. And I woke up one morning with a terrible hangover and a baby crying in the room beyond. And it was too much to bear. Well, I say it was too much, but it caused me to question my intake. And I spent 4 years questioning. I was, having waters between wines and even like doing stupid things like eating a fish on a Friday to try and get rid of my hangovers. I was trying all the old wives' tales. I never considered once actually stopping drinking. But the problem with that was that when I was hungover, I carried a lot of shame for the first time ever. Having a baby was a massive consequence to my very normal drinking habit. And it showed me that I wasn't functional on a Sunday morning. Hence the book's called A Thousand Wasted Sundays, was because I wasn't able to function and take care of my child. And that struggle went on for 4 years, where I'd go out with great sort of thoughts that I'm going to be the best drink in the world and I'm going to go home after one. But of course, when I had that one, my inhibitions were out of the window and I was ordering a tray of shots. That's just the sort of person I am. And somebody might call me an alcoholic, but I don't put myself in that box. I'd say I was someone that struggled with an alcohol use disorder. But it took me a long time to realize that. In fact, I had to have another baby. And after she was born, 6 weeks afterwards, realized I wasn't solving my own problems on my own. And I walked into the lounge and I said to my husband, I can't do this anymore. I need help. And that was the moment everything changed.
I got to know, what is your husband? It's John, isn't it? Your husband?
Yeah, yeah.
What did he think as you were writing the book? Did he ever say to you, Vic, it's pretty revealing. Do you really need to tell that story? Did he ask you to pull it back at any point, or did he just say, it's your life, it's your story?
He knew I was never going to pull it back. And actually, I was asked this question on my book launch recently. Somebody said, what does your husband think?
Yeah.
And I said to the audience, who here cares what their husband thinks? And no one put their hand up. We were like, there you go, there's your answer. I mean, I think when I sat down to write the book, never in a million years did I imagine everyone reading it. I just thought, well, I'm going to write this. I need to get this story out of it. Writing is a form of therapy for me. And I knew that I could make people laugh with all my kind of ridiculous tales, but perhaps be able to help some people along the way by people tuning into something that they never normally would, like yourself, because of the humor and because of the honesty. And that's what happened. So it's brutally honest, because literally I never imagined in a million years that anybody would sit and, read my inside my brain about my life. So yeah, it made it a much more real and, more interesting and tangible story because of that.
Victoria Vanstone is the author of 1,000 Wasted Sundays. Victoria, what's your reaction to things like, there's memes all over the place, mummy wine time, beer o'clock, there's all sorts of comments and ideas around this. What are your general thoughts from a sort of, a sociological perspective?
Well, I think I was a perfect candidate for that. This transition from party girl to mum, it made me quite vulnerable. They're pinking drinks, for example, which is when they put rosé in a pink can to make it look like it's a nice drink for a mum who's got a new baby. So actually they're targeting people like me. And I was the perfect person to be targeted because I did struggle. I'd gone from traveling all over the world and being independent to being stuck at home on my own with beige walls and a baby crying in my arms. And obviously I found it quite dull. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. That transition, I wasn't prepared for it. So therefore, alcohol became an answer for me, and mummy wine time, that wind down and reward at the end of the day, hit the right dopamine for me. And I was like, oh right, I've worked really hard, I deserve a glass of wine. Here's the baby to my husband, I'm going to sit and have a glass of wine in the evening. And I never questioned the messaging that was giving. I know now, looking back, that drinking in front of children, it kind of gives them a message, I need to drink to deal with you, I need to drink to deal with your behavior, you are stressing me out, so therefore mummy needs to numb out. And I look back and think, gosh, I'm so glad that my kids were so young when I gave up drinking, because I realize now it was really bad messaging, and it was exactly the messaging that I was given as a child, which led me to become an overdrinker. And I think when you're growing up and looking up to your peers, or your parents in particular, your spongy little child brain is absorbing everything. And like me, my kids would have equated fun to having a glass of wine. So I'm glad that I've been the cycle breaker. And I hope, I'm not silly, Justin. I'm sure my children may drink as they get older. I've got 3 little kids. One of them's turning 13. But I feel with me quitting, I'm nearly 8 years sober now, that perhaps I didn't have a choice about alcohol as I grew up. And I'm hoping that my children do.
So fitting in is a really big deal. I mean, Australian culture, so much of it is centred around the opportunity to drink alcohol. Over the years, I've faced enormous pressure from fully grown adults who just can't comprehend that I would go out and say, actually, no, I'm not drinking. I don't drink alcohol. They just think it's bizarre. I've had fully grown, like people in their 40s and 50s and 60s doing everything they can to either coerce or even trick me into consuming alcohol. I just don't drink. What I'd love to know is, when you look at the social pressure around drinking, both for us and for our kids, let's just stay with us for now. How much of mummy wine time culture do you think is actually about fitting in versus genuinely wanting to drink?
I totally agree with you, Justin, that this is a cultural issue where we think we have to drink to fit in. But things are changing, even in the time that I've been sober. I think people worry what other people's reactions are going to be. And I think we've spent so many years of our lives, dependent on the opinions of others. And something that is wonderful that comes along with sobriety is that you start to have boundaries and really care about yourself, which is something I never did. I never realized in this equation of life that I mattered and that my opinions mattered, and that how I take care of myself matters, and how that ripples on through my family. So for me, it's been a real adjustment since I had therapy to understand that it's okay for me to say no and stand my ground in social situations. And actually, there is nothing more empowering now for me than stepping into one of those situations where, a mother's group and everybody's having a glass of wine and going, here I am, I'm owning it, and I don't drink anymore. And things are changing in a way that, people used to try and twist my elbow and say, oh, you're boring, what's wrong with you? And that's not happening as much anymore. In fact, people are so much more aware of the impact on mental health from drinking lots of alcohol that they're a bit more like, well done. Well done. Here's a pat on the back. You're doing a great thing. And actually now people question me. Instead of going, what are you doing? They say, why are you doing it? Which is a really lovely turnaround.
Yeah, certainly statistically, the numbers show that people are less inclined to drink today than at any point since we've had research on this. The pressure is definitely declining, and it's been some time since anyone's given me a hard time. Generally, it's more of a, oh, good on you. Yeah, I remember I did Dry July, or I did Sober October, or I did whatever, and I felt better than I've ever felt when I gave up drinking. There's more articles in the press about giving up drinking than ever before, but it still persists. Here's probably maybe the last question to wrap up our conversation. For parents who are listening to this and thinking, maybe I should look at my relationship with alcohol, but they're not ready to start using the word sober or teetotaler or I've given up drinking, what would you say to them? I mean, this is not a conversation to convince the whole world to dry out, but rather to question their drinking. Scott Galloway, who has a very famous podcast, has been quoted as saying, from his point of view, he just wants to make sure that alcohol gives more to him than it takes from him. And if it's giving him more than it's taken, then he's happy with the equation there. How do you talk to people about this when they start to strike up these discussions with you?
I'd say it's not about how much you drink, it's about your own mental relationship with alcohol. If that's going awry, then you're worthy of seeking out support. And also, we forget that it's not really about alcohol, it's about who you were before it and who comes after it. That's really the journey. But also, if you're someone that's waking up on a Sunday morning questioning your behavior the night before and perhaps have a bit of a blackout, or you're really hungover or suffering from anxiety, we kind of let that go as being part of the drinking, and we're like, oh, well, I'm hungover, and we normalize the feeling of being hungover. And actually, that hangover is a siren blaring in your face saying, this isn't working for you. This is not working. And for me, it was really hard. I kind of fell through the gaps because I wasn't that extreme drinker, and I was this grey area drinker where a lot of people don't get seen because they don't feel like their problems got bad enough to be deserving of professional help. So what I will say is that no matter how much you drink or how it's making you feel, you are worthy of reaching out for some level of support. There's so much out there nowadays, whether it's a book, a podcast, therapy, or AA, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter how much you drink. If drinking is not working, it is worthy of reaching out and finding out you are now sober curious. This is this lovely term that's kind of been coined by a lady called Ruby Warrington about 10 years ago. And it's for anyone who's questioning their alcohol intake. You are now sober curious. And it's not this big word like alcoholic. It's more like a warm hug that's going to go, it's okay to question. And actually, it means you're on the right path to bettering yourself and your mental health.
Victoria Vanstone is the author of 1,000 Wasted Sundays and Mumming, the memoir about a life in the year of a mum trying to get better. Victoria, as always, just love the conversations, love your insights, and love your generosity and willingness to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Like this one? Share it. Let your friends know. I think that anything that can make your family happier is worth sharing around. Just click those buttons. It takes about 10 seconds and share the Happy Families podcast. We will link to Victoria's books in the show notes, as well as her podcast, Sober Awkward. If you'd like more info about making your family happier, check out happyfamilies.com.au.